and welcome. Today we are taking a full look at the Nerf Transformers Optimus Primal Blaster, aka the 2023 repaint of the Elite 2.0 Warden. Now before we open this thing up, I do want to say this is a new kind of packaging for Nerf, where you can actually see the blaster from both sides and get a really good feel for it. I think as far as a collector's item, this box does a really great job. You can display it in multiple different angles, and it will stand up on its own. So I really like the collector's aspect of this thing, but regardless, let's open this thing up and see what you get. So in the box, of course, you get the Optimus Primal Warden itself, and man, look at this paint job. It is really, really great. And you get 16 orange elite darts. So now that we have this thing out of the box, let's go over the blaster. If you're already familiar with the Warden, of course, you're going to know this stuff, but if you're not, the Warden features two sling mounts, one on the back and one on the front. It features one tactical rail on the top. The grips are okay and definitely usable, but not quite as good as the grips on the rough cut, at least for me personally. Operation is actually very simple, and because this blaster is essentially a reskinned rough cut, it is feature packed. So it is a pump action springer, so to prime the blaster, pull the pump back and push it forward. Then, because this blaster features two plunger tubes, when you pull the trigger all the way, it will fire two darts at once. But this is also a two-stage trigger, so if you don't want to fire both at once, you can fire one at a time. To do that, you have to pull the trigger halfway. And the blaster also has slam fire, so when you hold down the trigger and repeatedly pump the handle, you will continuously fire. So that is basically the operation and features of this thing, but now let's take this thing outside and put it over the chronograph. We will be using the included elite darts. 66, 63, duplicate 63, 57, 52, and 60. So here's the average, but this thing is a Smart AR blaster, so you're going to get lower and lower performance as you go down. So most of the time, you're going to be looking at high 60s to low 70s on the top barrels, and then 50s to 60s on the bottom. So nothing too crazy, but definitely not bad. Now let's fire some shots downrange. That was pretty solid elite style performance. Now I'm gonna go back inside and share my final thoughts. So what are my final thoughts on the Optimus Primal Blaster, aka the repainted Warden? So if we ignore the awesome paint job for a second, what do I think about the Warden itself? Now the Warden is kind of an interesting blaster because it is really fun to use, it is feature packed, and it's a very reasonable price. But the only reason that the Warden is great, and this is why people have issues with it, is because it's a strictly inferior rough cut. The rough cut pretty much does everything this blaster can do a little bit better. Its performance is slightly better, it's a more smooth operation, and you can take it apart. With the Warden, it is a clips and solvent weld. So this thing is an absolute nightmare to take apart. I would say borderline impossible. And while this version and all recent Wardens have been the updated version, the original version of this blaster was notorious for breaking. So that really gave this thing an awful reputation. But even if it is clipped and solvent welded, it does not have that fatal flaw anymore. My other Warden is an updated one, and I've ran that really hard, and it definitely has not had any issues. So those were my opinions on the blaster itself, but now let's talk about this paint scheme. This is seriously fantastic. It reminds me a lot of the Transformers barricades that Nerf did a while back. It's super detailed, it's bright, it's vibrant, there's little hidden Easter eggs all over that you can find. Both sides are unique, but they both look really good. The actual quality of the paint job is phenomenal. There are no like splotchy lines or anything. Like the lines are super sharp, no paint spillage. It is just all around extremely impressive, and as a Transformers fan, I am extremely glad that they made this. And with how the box is set up, this is a great collector's item, a great display piece, so if you're a Transformers fan, I can really get behind this thing. My only real complaint is I would have rather they brought back the rough cut and put this exact paint scheme on it. I think people would have gone absolutely nuts over this thing. But even if the Warden is definitely a step down from the rough cut, it is still a very fun blaster. Thank you very much for watching. I would love to hear your thoughts on this Warden repaint. Have a good one, and happy blasting.